Okay, so who wants to feel more pleasure and less pain? How does that feel for you? How does that feel? I am going to drop it like it's hot today, and I'm going to share with you my absolute favorite. Feels like a very bold claim, but I'm going to own it. My favorite universal law, the law of polarity, and this is the most misunderstood universal law. And I'll get more into that as to why that is so in a minute. But what I really wanted to do is we can't really understand the law of polarity until we understand how pain and pleasure works, right? So I'm going to share with you an image, a map, right? So come with me, share with me, and I'm going to blow your mind just a little bit and help you change the gaze in how you understand and perceive pain and pleasure, and what we can do to experience a deeper pleasure, a more innate pleasure, and feel more alive, whereby pain doesn't feel so bad. And we feel like, so many of us feel like we understand pain, we know pain, but what is this? What is it really like to experience this reverence for pleasure beyond the kind of perverted, kinky, misunderstood way that we think pleasure is, right? So let's have a little look, right? I'm going to share with you my map. So this is my pain and pleasure map, right? Now, inside this map, you're going to see the comfort zone, right? So inside this comfort zone, we're going to see how we have a pain threshold, right? So whenever we move through pain and pleasure, we have a threshold to both, right? This is what a lot of people do not understand. But let me draw your attention to the comfort zone first, right? So our most primal, our most primal threshold and comfort zone is to be in an area that feels safe, right? It's where we have manageable pain, kind of normalized it. Generally speaking, we have goal orientated pleasure, right? We also have a limited range of emotions and felt experience, because you got to remember that this comfort zone is is quite small, right? It's quite limited. And so, if you think of this infinite possibility, then um that is just not available to us when we're inside the comfort zone. Now, when we've been in our comfort zone for too long, we kind of like butt up against the edge of what is the pain threshold, right? So you can think of it as an edge. So our comfort zones begin to feel a little bit painful, right? When you're in those times where you're like, I'm comfortable here, but it just no longer fits, right? You feel like you're kind of bursting at the seams. I often get this feeling like I want to like rip my skin off, right? I want to make more room because everything just feels tight and restricted. So that's our first pain threshold or pain edge. Okay. So then when we move into that, we move past this, because remember, is these thresholds and these edges are just a figment of our imagination. It's an illusion of our mind, right? And so this is why we have them, and this is why we get to evolve and grow and do all of these exciting things, right? So once we like melt into this new pain threshold, what can we feel? Sometimes we can feel like all of a sudden our relationships begin to feel a little bit shitty. We see things that haven't been there before, right? Because we've expanded our gaze beyond our comfort zone. So all of a sudden that relationship doesn't feel so good anymore, right? And then there can be emotional and mental discord, because we're going, what the hell is going on? It's this foreign ground where we begin to feel a little bit uncomfortable. Often when that happens, we have an unregulated nervous system because our nervous system is going, what's going on? What's going on? It's on high alert, right? What happens when we've got with an unregulated nervous system is you've got no libido, right? Because it's like I am dry because we don't feel safe to be in pleasure. And then we feel avoidant, right? So we withdraw from the world, right? And we go, oh my goodness, this is just too much. I'm just going to hang back here a little bit, right? And so this is what happens when we enter into this new pain threshold and this new pain edge, because you've got to remember in the law of polarity, pain and pleasure is the same pole, right? And so when we speak to the law of polarity, I'm not speaking about the masculine and feminine, okay? That is not polarity. Masculine and feminine, they are not opposites. Polarity is opposites, right? And so, and well, if we really want to go into another conversation, but I don't want to digress, but I'll just like kind of plant the seed a little bit here for a little minute. And so basically, what's happened is the law of gender and the law of polarity, which are two universal laws or hermetic laws, whichever you're most familiar with. And so these ancient laws, these ancient wisdom that has literally been around for thousands and thousands of years, that is, that is BC. So what they've done is over time, they have morphed the law of polarity and the law of gender together, right? So when they did this, when we morphed the law of polarity and the law of gender together, and so now most people think of polarity is masculine and feminine, when in actually fact they are absolutely not. But when we did that, we made the masculine and feminine opposite, right? Now, the biggest, let's say, struggle that people have is allowing opposites to coexist without seeing the other one as wrong or the enemy. Now, this is what's happened to man and woman over thousands of years since they've done this, right? And so now there's a whole bunch of polarity teachings floating around that's saying that it's talking about it's man and woman or masculine and feminine, and it is just not accurate, right? So the first things first is we need to just like just to separate those laws again, because they are not the same thing, right? Men and women are not opposites, right? Masculine and feminine are not opposites. And the discord that is created in relationships, in equality, I don't need to tell you how that shit show's rippled out throughout the last few thousand years, right? Anyway, back to pain and pleasure, right? So what we need to remember is pain and pleasure are their opposites, right? They're opposites. So they belong on the same pole. They're the same thing. So everyone experiences different pain, different pleasure, and depending on, everyone has a different pain threshold, right? And so depending on our own personal innate thresholds depends on our experience with the world, right? You think about, I often speak about the law of polarity, and I speak about how a temperature gauge, right? Hot and cold, same, right? It's the same pole, the same temperature gauge. Now, I'm in Australia, right? And so for me, a 35-degree day is a beautiful day, right? 33 degrees Celsius, right? Beautiful day. It's hot, but it's summer. It's not pretty standard day in summer in Australia, right? Now, if you were to go to Finland or Alaska, a 35-degree day is an absolute scorcher and people will be melting on the streets, right? And vice versa, it is butt ass cold over there, right? So in these minus 10 degrees, days, I would be freezing my absolute tits off, but they are much more comfortable and normalized to these colder days, right? Because such cold weather is foreign to my body. So depending on our experience with all of these things in our lives, all of these areas, pleasure, pain, relationships, wealth, health, temperature, weather, It's all relevant based on our experience, right? Based on what we've normalized and largely what has been comfortable for us, right? And so we need to remember that to understand the pain and pleasure threshold here. So, are you with me? Are you with me? I hope you are, because I find this stuff very, very exciting. And it is really extraordinary to play with this in everyday life, right? So, back to the pleasure threshold, back to the pain threshold. So, once we melt into this pain threshold, we do melt into pain threshold. The more we're in pain, then we normalize pain, right? We begin to feel comfortable with pain, right? It's what we do. We feel comfortable with pain. So much so that a lot of people will feel comfortable in their pain threshold, right? And this happens a lot in our spaces, because what happens is I I'm safe with pain, right? I feel safe with pain. When I'm in pain, I know pain, I trust pain. I know that I'm strong enough to move through pain, right? So a lot of people will only live their life in that comfort zone and in that pain threshold, right? Because that is what they know. The comfortability of their life experience, that is what they know. That is what's safe for them, right? On their pole, in their threshold, right? Where they are on that thermometer. Now, this is the thing of when we move forward, is for some people, eventually it's going to go, hang on a minute, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel good for me, right? And so this is the beautiful thing, is because again, we go, okay, eventually we hit a pleasure zone, right? And it's this newfound, it's this expanded growth that happens. We've experienced the comfort zone, we've experienced the pain threshold, we've got comfortable with that, we've melted into that, and then we're in another pleasure zone, right? We've moved past these layers, these boxes, right? So imagine it as like we're shedding this, you hear about the breakdown to break through. It's a very similar feeling here. This is what's actually happening. It's the breakdown and breakthrough is the pain threshold and a pleasure zone, right? That's exactly what's happening in our bodies. When we reach this pleasure zone, we feel safety in the body. So we feel a new found safety in our bodies, right? So our comfort zone is expanding, it's getting bigger, right? So every time we move throughout these zones and thresholds, our comfort zone is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that is a beautiful thing, right? Because the more we're comfortable with a wider range of experiences and emotions, then the more epic and divine experience we can have, right? So, in this pleasure zone, we have a regulated nervous system. We feel safe in our bodies. We feel euphoric, right? Everything like it's euphoria. And we have a sense of inner peace, right? It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Now, what happens here? What happens here? I think that a lot of people really don't understand. A lot of people don't understand, and that is that we have a pleasure threshold and edge, right? Like, let that little baby sink in for a little minute, right? We not only have a pain threshold, we have a pleasure threshold as well, right? And what happens when we butt up against this pleasure threshold? We get those feelings of it's too good to be true. It's too good to be true. And we begin to self sabotage. And we begin to really dance with the pleasure and pain, right? We have what we call like a sub drop, and it's this crashing low, right? Happens a lot if you go to like, high euphoric events or situations, right? And you're riding that high, and then afterwards you often crash and burn afterwards. This is exactly what's happened, because you've been in your pleasure zone and there's a natural pleasure threshold. And so there's a crashing low that comes because, let me take a little sip. Because our body has a natural organic response and management plan when it comes to pleasure and pain. Where the body needs equilibrium in its body, in our body. It needs equilibrium, right? So this crashing low serves a purpose because it's the body's natural way to find equilibrium. And then what happens, which is really interesting, is because when we're in this, we have a desire for pain, right? We have a desire for pain. There's a hell of a lot of masochists out there that are completely unaware that they're masochists, right? That they get off on pain, right? There's a lot of people now. Masochists, for those of you who don't know, that I speak a lot about archetypal energy and archetypal psychology, and the masochist is a big one because a masochist is someone who gets off on pain, right? Now, usually, we hear about this a lot in the kink community. However, the masochist is in everyday life, in everyone to some degree, because we all have a pain threshold, right? We all have an unconscious desire for pain. But the question is are we in the power of our pain, or are we in the false power of the pain? And what I mean by that is, is when we're in the power of, let's say, the masochist, when we're in the power of the pain, we can go, okay, I am resilient. I am resilient and I trust myself. I know I have the capacity to deal with this. I know I trust myself enough. I trust spirit enough that I can deal with whatever life throws at me, right? So there's a real beauty in pain, right? Because we know it's here for a reason, right? We know that eventually that pain and pleasure will exist at the same time when we allow it to be, and we will evolve through that, right? Because here's the beautiful thing about these polarity is there's a natural equilibrium that takes place, right? There's a natural balance that we organically, the body chases, right? The subconscious mind chases, it finds until it restores some sort of equilibrium. Now, if we're in the false power of that, it's happening unconsciously, right? So if you're in your false power of your masochist, in the false power of pain, your relationship to pain, where you're getting off on the pain, but you're making things hard for yourself. So you're seeking out pain consciously or unconsciously, you're seeking out pain like it's like cutting your nose off in spite your face, right? It's unnecessary. You're making things harder for yourself. And so this is a common thing, is when you feel like you can't move forward because unconsciously pleasure feels so unsafe, right? And we're more comfortable with pain. I know I can deal with pain, but what the hell does this beautiful existence of a life and this deeply juicy and pleasurable life feel like? It feel, for a lot of people, it's quite foreign because we're used to being on struggle street, right? But no matter, we constantly have layers of how this looks like and how it's mirrored and reflected and projected in our lives, right? Fascinating, isn't it? Okay, let's go back to the share. I'm going to share with you some more. Now, once we go through this pleasure threshold, right, and we've recognized that, okay, is it too good to be true? Maybe I am self-sabotaging, right? And we really begin to dance with pain and pleasure. And we let both of them allowed to coexist. This is the biggest thing here, is letting them allowing them to coexist, right? Allowing them both to be, right? When we begin to do this, there are no more thresholds. There are no more thresholds. There are no more edges. We can really begin to have epic relationships. We have deeper intimacy, right? There's a divine love that is available to us, right? There's a trust in self and all things. It's non-goal orientated pleasure, right? So we activate the pleasure body because we know the power it has in our performance, in our productivity, in our relationships, in how we live, love, lead, right? But it has to be non-goal orientated pleasure, because this is the thing with what we've believed pleasure to be, and it's how been largely misunderstood, is because we believe that pleasure has to have a destination. We have to get something in order to feel pleasure, right? But it's about non-goal orientated pleasure. It's about melting into the pleasure body and just allowing the yum and the hum to move through you, right? And then we begin to commune and have reverence with pain, right? So all of a sudden, pain isn't so bad, right? Yes, it can suck balls, and yes, it can hurt, but also there's a real beauty there, because there's a real trust there, because we're allowing all things to coexist, right? And we are present with life, right? These are all beautiful things to feel. These are all powerful things to feel. And so when we really begin to we allow ourselves to have this beautiful, infinite, agile dance with all of these things, right? With all of these thresholds, with all of these zones. And so when we do this, we begin to have a very different experience with life, right? Because when we allow all things to coexist, remembering that the law of polarity is a mutable law, it's designed to be changed, right? So it's not here to be fixed. It's not here to be set in concrete. And this is what a lot of people forget. A lot of people forget that that the mutable laws are here to help us move through things, right? They're designed to change. But what happens is we double down and we believe that they're fixed and unchanging, when in actuality, they're here to remind us to allow all things to coexist, right? When we allow all things to coexist without seeing them as bad or wrong or the enemy or weak, that's when we change the game, right? That's when we can really evolve into this new level, a new way of life, a new way of feeling. And it is exquisite, right? And it does make a massive difference in how we feel every day. There's more ownership, there's more sovereignty. And I don't say those words loosely and flippantly. When I say that, I feel it to the bone, right? That's that truth to the bone that's told through the flesh, right? So that is my pain and pleasure map. And I hope that you have enjoyed it. If you want to dance with pain and pleasure a little bit more, if you really want to begin to understand how they move and really begin to integrate this into your life, because the biggest thing is not just knowing it, but living it. Not just knowing it and understanding it through your mental body, at through the mind, but embodying it in every moment, every day into your life, right? Because that's what it's about. So if you need some help with that, I'm going to get you to click on the link below. Let's hang out. Let's get a deeper understanding. And maybe you might want the success cage map. And that's going to help you understand. So you know what? I'm going to drop the link to the success cage map there to you for free down below. I'm going to pop in a little pain and pleasure meditation for you as well. Drop it in below so you can experience the medicine and the magic of this work when we allow everything to coexist. I am Renee Main, and I will see you next time, gorgeous human. Bye, everybody.